Pennsylvania wrestling Pennsylvania wrestling fans. This is the Penn Live Wrestling Podcast. As I stumbled across our intro, I'm Bob Flounders, joined by Jim Carlson. Boy, we got a lot to get to before we get into this podcast. We have a new place to on Spotify to come find us. We're no longer. You don't have to look for the blue-white breakdown and see our special wrestling podcast. Even though I did, Jimmy, really like the blue-white takedown. It's the Penn Live Wrestling Podcast. If you search that on Spotify or anywhere else, it'll come up. Great new logo. Shout out Megan. But we're going to talk, Jimmy, about Penn State's recent tussle. It wasn't much of a tussle with Wyoming. We're going to look ahead to what's going on for Penn State's program moving forward. We also want to tout this because we have a little bit later another special guest to get to on our podcast. All credit to Jimmy. In a future podcast, we're going to have Penn State's wrestling manager, Cael Sanderson, on. I'm looking forward to it. He's in his first year. Jimmy's looking forward to it. Former Penn State wrestler. We're going to have a lot, I think, to get to with him, Jimmy. And before we get into this podcast, I told you I was going to talk about this. Of all the things that I'm excited to talk about with you, we are going. You told me. You shouldn't have told me because now I'm going to just be like looking forward to this. When Penn State's in the Nashville area a little bit later, Cael Sanderson is looking forward to visiting a fast food establishment. That's the tease. We'll get into it a little bit later, but I can't wait to hear what you have to say about that, Jimmy. Let's just start with you. Thanks for putting up with me. You covered the Wyoming match. It probably lived up to its billing. It was not that competitive, but it might even have been a little bit more lopsided than maybe you thought.
It was about 75 minutes at most, about 7,300 people, which wasn't bad. It was the Red Call crowd plus about, 800. Ended up being a snowy afternoon. They had to move the match to the Jordan Center because of the women's volleyball regional semifinal. But there were none of the bouts went 7 minutes. I looked up on Wyoming's website to see how they handled the match, and they said Wyoming had a little trouble at Penn State, losing 54-0, and but at one point their 149-pounder only trailed 4-3. Now he ended up losing. He ended up losing to Shane Van Ness 16-3. That guy, but that is big time public relations right in there.
That's called spin, Jimmy. That's
right. Spin. Trying to get around that. It's interesting because I spoke with the Wyoming coach Mark Branch after the match, and he was certainly not happy. I asked him what he could get out of that. He said, well, if none of your guys wrestle a full 7 minutes, it's tough to get anything out of the match like that. And I certainly understand. And he was sort of, clearly dejected, understandably. But he did confirm a return match for Penn State next year at Wyoming. He said that would be a big deal. And, of course, he hoped that his wrestlers could go a full 7 in front of their home crowd. So we'll see if that comes off next year.
Yeah. So Jimmy, just as far as you were you were talking about the Lehigh match and how at the PP&L Center and kind of the atmosphere and Cael's thoughts on that. It was not necessarily a very close match. It's going to be a lot of those this year. Not necessarily a very close bout, but just as far as the atmosphere, maybe anything Cael wanted to share with you that you thought was compelling just about the match and maybe how they wrestled. I don't know how you could be really upset about a win that large, but I mean, if you're Cael Sanderson, I think the attention to detail is always there. So I'm just curious kind of what he had for you.
Well, a question for him was comparing it to the Lehigh match, Wyoming to Lehigh. And while Lehigh offered stronger competition and some better bouts and better matchups, there was still, it just seemed to be more, in my opinion, seemed to be a little bit more zip, a little bit more enthusiasm in the Wyoming match. They were wrestling through their moves, hitting a lot of, getting a lot of turns, a lot of back points. There were 5 falls, 4 technical falls, and Van Ness's major decision, right? So, and Cael agreed with that. He thought that they wrestled well. And he, again, he was one who said, wrestling through moves and all that. So yeah, he was pretty pleased, and he's looking forward to just, as he says, always what's next up, just keep going, moving forward.
Yeah. It's the Penn Live Wrestling Podcast. Jim Carlson, Bob Flounders here talking about Penn State wrestling. They're looking good right now, but it's still December. I'm sure Cael's got a checklist of things that he wants these guys to work on. We're going to talk about their trip to Nashville in a little bit, but I wanted to get to a couple of talking points with you and your thoughts. You mentioned kind of leg turns and stuff like that. Casey Cunningham is a guy I think we need to discuss. What do you have for us on that?
Well, when we were just speaking about the near falls and the pins and all, a lot of those were with leg turns, and Cael's the one who brought that up. And nobody asked about Casey. Cael brought it up and said that there were many leg turns during the Wyoming match, and that's a credit to Casey because he is the one who works with the wrestlers on those. The bow and arrow, where you reach back and grab the far ankle and then turn, sort of almost looks like a front headlock when you turn them. It's not, but when that leg has to go, you're going to go. If the guy on top is strong enough and you've got the leg coming back and torquing the neck and shoulders the other way, you're going to go over. And their Penn State is very good at that move. It looks painful as all get out. And I'm sure it is.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure it is, Jim.
He gave specific credit to Casey on that, and that was a kind of wrestler, Casey was. Interestingly, and just flashed into my head here, 1999, Penn State hosted the Nationals at the Jordan Center. And the only time that's ever happened, the only time it ever will happen, because now there's at least an 18,000 limit on arenas for Nationals. But that was Cael's freshman year. That was the first of his 4 titles he won here. In Casey's senior year, where he beat Clint Musser of Penn State in the finals. So they both won titles together in 1999 at the Jordan Center.
Well, I just want to say, hey, listen, if you're listening to this or watching us, that's some pretty good recall there from Jim Carlson. This is kind of why you guys need to check out our podcast, because Jimmy, as I've said on other episodes of this podcast, Jimmy is really followed wrestling like few other people I think in the state have, as a writer, just as somebody, a supporter of the sport. I know how much you put into it, but that's a pretty good pull from 1999. That's a 25-year-old pull, Jimmy. Kudos to you. I wanted to move this along a little bit. When you talked about, it was a bonus points, they were aplenty. In terms of just maybe wrestlers or performances that caught your eye, I think Mitchell Mesenbrink is a guy that you wanted to talk about. So what is it about him that kind of stood out to you?
Well, he's one of the more interesting guys on the team. He's very sincere when you speak with him. But he mentioned this week, I can't recall the question exactly, but about him his improvement things and how he sees that happening. And he said that he's very, very insightful, very thoughtful. And he goes, it's not setting finite goals is how he explained it. It's what it is. It's more infinite, and that's what makes it fun. That's how he improves. Like last year, he had a little trouble getting off the bottom. You wouldn't think it since he made the national finals, but in the national finals, he did have problems getting off the bottom. He has worked on that. So, and he's mentioned that he's improved on that, and that's what makes it fun for him in the sport, just getting better at little things. And he's done things. He says there's moves I've worked on with my father. He said since he was 8 years old. And that just comes all naturally. But when you set specific goals and you work on various things that you have to get better on it, and that proves successful, that's what makes the sport fun for him.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back to, because you noted it up at the top, how Wyoming's spin on the Van Ness match, that at one point it was close. I think you said it was 4-3 at one point en route to a Van Ness major. Was it just him kind of, is that his style where he just kind of goes to work and gradually just starts wailing on people? Did he start slow? What was the? I mean, he majored the kid, and it's not easy to major anyone in a college match. But is he methodical, Jimmy, or was it just one of those matches where the way the kid wrestled, it was kind of hard to open up?
Methodical to me translates sort of a slow starter. I don't, if it was so yes, could you look at it as a slow start? Perhaps, but that's not Van Ness's style.
I got it.
He's always the aggressor. He always, and what Cael says, he always is pushing forward, moving forward. And so he likes to score. But yes, he did give up the only takedown of the day. It was 29-1, the takedowns. But it came off it was a counter. The guy got to his legs quickly, and Van Ness had to give it up. It's just one of those things. You don't always have to counter everything. You can be in control of a match. If you give up a takedown, it's not a big deal. And once he did that, he was out immediately, started getting takedowns of his own, had a few turns. So, yeah, that I don't think anyone was ever concerned at that point.
Yeah. 29-1. That's a pretty good ratio. I think, it would have been 29-0. It's just like, that's pretty bleak. If you're
probably going to win if you had a 29-1.
No wonder that Wyoming coach was a little crusty afterward. If they would have went the whole match without getting one takedown, sounds like he got a little bit lucky there, but man.
I didn't want to anger Mr. Branch. He was a 4-time NCAA finalist for Oklahoma State and a 2-time champ. And believe me, he looked like he could still go. It was a calm conversation.
Could be a tough week in the wrestling room at Wyoming. I don't know what's in store for them, Jimmy, for the return match at Wyoming. I hope you get to go. I know you're a Cowboy at heart, but we're going to play that by ear to see if you get to go out there. But I did want to say, Jimmy, let's just spin it forward, look at some things that Penn State has upcoming. I know there's some things you're excited to talk about. We've talked the last couple of weeks about a 36-3 match in a match. I think that was 55-0. So I'm sure Cael is looking forward to maybe some stiffer competition as well. So why don't we just run through what's up next in the coming weeks for Penn State wrestling?
Well, this Sunday, they're leaving, I believe, Friday night for Nashville. And it's called a Collegiate Duals. And it's going to be an 8-team gathering, 2 4-team pods. And the first 4 teams will go on Saturday. And the second 4, in which Penn State is in, wrestles on Sunday, 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock. The first 4 teams on Saturday are Lock Haven, interestingly, Iowa State, Ohio State, and North Carolina. So it's, a good challenge for Lock Haven. Penn State is with Binghamton, Arkansas Little Rock, which is building a program pretty quickly.
Okay.
In Missouri, which has been very good through the years, last few years. Well, a lot of years. They're a pretty solid program ever since Brian Smith came around in 2000, 2001. So this week it's at the Frist campus of Ensworth High School, I believe. And it used to, or the Ensworth School. It's now a high school. But the Frist family named that, and they are Tennessee politicians. Now, Bob, where else are you going to get that information except here? I'm
telling you, you guys are crazy if you don't just come back just to listen to Jimmy and his attention to detail. It's staggering. I don't know. I just don't know how many podcasts are talking about it like this. But so it's at a high school. I'm sure it's not a typical high school, but I mean, did you have a sense? Did Cael say anything about maybe the size of the environment, or? I'm pretty sure there's going to be some Penn State fans down there. It's not that far of a.
I would think there would be, just for the Nashville novelty itself.
Yeah.
These things, the NWCA tries to get around the country. Last year, the year before, it's in New Orleans. I don't think the crowds are great, and I don't think it'll be tremendous crowds this weekend for many reasons. A, Nashville. B, Christmas season. But, there'll be some people who are interested. But I would expect a shutout against Binghamton. They have a couple of guys maybe ranked, deeply down in the rankings or so. I'm not sure it'll be a big challenge. I don't think – it probably won't be quite as bad as Wyoming, but we'll see. Then comes Little Rock. Now, Little Rock has some studs. Nasir Bailey at 133 and Stephen Little at 197, for example. And, of course, Missouri, a little bit stronger, although they've had some injury problems lately. They're off to a bad start. I think they're 1-3, and they're not used to that. So, they're going to want to get that turned around.
Yeah, now they get Penn State.
Right. Yeah, so that'll really help. But, maybe Penn State could lose a couple of bouts in those two matches. I'm not saying they will, but it could happen, I suppose. But going down through the list, I don't think Luke Lillidahl, it's difficult to say.
It is tough.
What else?
Yeah.
At 125, true freshman will, I'm not sure he'll be challenged this weekend. We'll see. Missouri's Noah Certain medically retired last weekend, so he would have been a pretty good match for Luke. He'll either be replaced with Gage Walker, who has his 5 matches in there trying to protect his red shirt, or another true freshman, I believe, is what the Missouri coach told me a little while ago. Braden Davis, then, who's up to 133 this year, would get Bailey. I think Bailey probably be a little stockier for Davis. It'll be a nice test for Davis to see how he handles and that strength, because he struggled a little bit with Ryan Crookham from Lehigh. Of course, understandably, he's number 1 in the country, but Bailey's number 3, right? So again, are you showing improvement? Are you being a little bit more aggressive? That's what you're going to want to see out of Davis. I don't think Bo Bartlett will have too much trouble. He will have a couple guys, Logan Joffrey of Missouri, I think he's 13, and number 17, Jordan Williams of Little Rock. But Bo's good and steady. He is more methodical, as you talked earlier. He sometimes waits on his offense and then goes on the attack. Then comes Van Ness, who should go through pretty well this weekend. Tyler Kasak, a couple of guys, but he and Mesenbrink again shouldn't be challenged too much. The big match of the weekend, probably even nationally, is at 174. Levi Haynes, State, ranked 2nd against number 1, Keegan O'Toole from Missouri. And O'Toole's a 2-time champ, 2-time third placer, and he is in this Carter Starace role of, hey, this is his 5th, will be his 5th NCAA tournament.
Ooh.
Not too many guys out there. Starace's going for 5. O'Toole had David Carr in his way and didn't win 4 titles, but, he was in the hunt for all 4 for sure. But Haynes beat O'Toole in the World Team Trials in September 6-0.
All right. Yeah.
With 2 takedowns, a push-out point, and I think a passivity point. So you can say, well, folk style and freestyle are different, which is certainly true. But with the fact that Haynes got 2 takedowns, that certainly going to work in his favor. It's not like he scored his points on the mat, and there's no mat wrestling in freestyle. So I actually spoke with O'Toole this week, and I asked him about the match with Haynes, and he didn't go into great detail, but he said he made it clear that, yes, I'm looking forward to that match. And he said, he went through the points that I just said, how they were scored on him and all. But it's interesting because, they're sort of alike, 2 well-spoken kids, nice, polite, and they both like to hunt. O'Toole was telling me that he got a deer in October. Haynes is a big-time hunter. I said, geez, you can always talk to Levi about hunting, and he didn't say words. I don't think they're going to talk about hunting.
Yeah. all business, but it does sound to me like it's nice access from Missouri for you to talk to a wrestler and the head coach. I would imagine on Penn Live there might be some stories regarding the hunting and the matches. I'm looking forward to it, but there's no chance, Jimmy, that I'm going to let you go here on the Penn Live Wrestling Podcast talking about Penn State wrestling and what's coming up this weekend in Nashville. I know Cael is looking forward to seeing the Haynes match, assuming it comes off, and looking forward to some other matches. But I have it on pretty good authority that Cael Sanderson is also looking forward to a very specific stop to a iconic fast food place. So let's just get into that.
Well, he was asked on Tuesday whether there'd be a lot of any sightseeing in Nashville, whether he had some country music fans in the locker room, which he said he did. And then he said, yeah, we have to shut it off, but he was just kidding about that. But he said, no, it's a business trip. He says, but you know, we're there on a business trip. I don't think there'll be a lot of sightseeing. But he said, yeah, I would like to go to Waffle House. And not the Waffle Shop, the one at State College, is the Waffle House, is the Southern chain.
Everyone knows. Yep.
Yeah, that staff would probably do some damage, and the whole team could do some damage at the Waffle House, right? We'll see if that comes off.
Free publicity, I love it. But yeah, I would imagine, like you said, that's I would think if there's a will, there's a way. The staff, the wrestlers aren't. I don't think the wrestlers are, because I know the Waffle House menu is not exactly the healthiest menu, but that doesn't really apply to the staff. And I would imagine if they can free up about 35 to 40 minutes, this is going to be a nice little tab at the Waffle House, Jimmy.
That's right. And plus, Christmas is coming up. They don't have a match till January 10th. Hey, it's all good, right?
Yeah, you could probably, even the wrestlers could probably get away. The problem is, though, once you smell all that greasy food, like the floodgates are going to open. I think Cael and his staff are smart enough to maybe say that you guys are going to go. You guys can go eat something, but you're not eating with us, because we have one thing on our minds, and it's caloric intake. And
yeah, we've got salads in the van.
I wish there was like a way that maybe the Penn State wrestling SID or whoever's going to be down there, maybe just take a video or something of the carnage that's going to go down at the wall. If it does, I think it would do really well. I'd really like to see those guys go to town on some fried food and some waffles. I think it'd be thoroughly enjoyable. I've eaten at one too. You don't feel great for like 6 hours after you go there, but it's worth it for the 30 minutes of work you put in.
They should specify which one so they can bulk up on the food order. So just one quick note back to Nashville. 197 or 184 Sriracha again should be fine as usual. 197 just short of 174. Very interesting. There and nationally with Josh Barr, where he could get most likely will get Stephen Little of Arkansas Little Rock, and possibly he could get Rocky Elam too from Missouri, and so they're both ranked higher than he is. I don't know if he'll get Elam because he's been had a minor injury, and I'm not sure Brian Smith will bring him back for this tournament. Might save him for the new year. But if Barr gets both of those and would be successful against both those guys, again, it's pretty much solidifying his spot in the lineup. And I think that lineup, it may be, and you can't say this for sure right now, barring injuries or whatever, but this is as early as a lineup Penn State has been solidified in the last 5, 6, maybe 7 years, because there's always been one or two weights traditionally where it's not decided, sometimes till February, up to the Big Ten tournament. Well, who's going it this way? Who's going it that way? But I think with Kasek, what he's done, he's ranked third now. Plus, I failed to mention this earlier, Alex Facundo, Kasek competition 157, was on crutches at the Wyoming match. And Cael said that he doesn't think surgery will be necessary, but it could be a while before that comes back and he can get back on the mat. And with Barr, against Lucas Cochran, who he beat at the Army match, now a couple of big wins, Michael Beard, and we'll see what happens this weekend. Those are the two big ones. And 133 with Davis. Nagai was hurt quite a while ago. Sounds like a long-term injury. So that lineup could be etched in stone, which is interesting that it's, again, at this point, ready to go. And after this weekend, they go Michigan State at January 10th at home, and the Big Ten schedule starts. So it'll be.
I like it. Jimmy, great stuff as always here on the Penn Live Wrestling Podcast, talking about Penn State's destruction of Wyoming. What's in store for the program coming up? A little Waffle House note. Cael, I'm sure you're listening or watching to this. Good luck. Good luck. Good luck at the Waffle House. You and your assistants, maybe open it up, add another notch in the belt. You can open it up after you've put down about 11,000 calories. Good luck to the Penn State team this weekend. Jimmy, and don't forget, if you're going to listen to this podcast, please do. You can always find it on Spotify. It's got its own. You just look up Penn Live Wrestling Podcast. Don't forget, coming up, we got a new guest coming up very soon, and it's a Penn State. It's a Penn State name, Clay Steadman, Penn State's general manager for the wrestling team. We're hopeful to record an interview with him. I'm looking forward to it. So is Jim Carlson. That's it for now, guys. We will be back very soon.